All right, so I had to weigh in for a while before I could think of anything constructive to say about the Lincoln Douglas topic, because this thing is a piece of work. As you start reading about the concept of privacy, one of the first things you're going to find is it's very hard to define. You can't get people to agree on what the definition of privacy even is. That there are a lot of different kinds of things that are lumped together under the umbrella term privacy, control over information, whether you have autonomy over certain decisions, a core of decisions in your life, whether you're entitled to have your bodily integrity respected. Those three are very different from one another, but they are all included under the rubric of privacy. So you've got this very expansive and very heterogeneous idea, and it's put in a simple statement that I'm not sure there can be a meaningful controversy about. The first parallel that came to my mind was a debate topic that said resolved objects are blue. Well, some objects are blue, so the affirmative could win that argument. Some objects are not blue, so the negative could win that argument. How do you debate that? Resolved privacy is undervalued. Well, Kim Kardashian certainly undervalues her privacy. She could afford to stay out of the spotlight a little bit more. The affirmative can win that argument. Thomas Pynchon probably goes a little bit overboard trying to keep himself out of the spotlight, so the negative can win that argument. How do you have a controversy over that? I mean, it could be that you try to say, well, in general, but debaters hone in and pick those statements apart. Is there anything meaningful you can say about the entire human race or even just the entire United States when it comes to privacy? Or are there such different practices and different institutional setups that any statement you make is true some places and not others? Anyway, the topic you have is a topic you have, and one thing that I think is kind of nice is the side that I sense is easier to defend went to the affirmative. As a matter of fact, it's going to be another day before I come back and say anything about what I think is strategic on the affirmative. It's always been my impression, maybe your experience is different, but that the negative has kind of a downhill fight. That the negative has the longer speeches, which means they get to develop their arguments a little bit more, they have to do a little bit less running and gunning. And it is the case that the affirmative still gets to speak last, but that job of crystallizing the issues and pretty much giving up on the line by line in the last speech, it always seems to me, the very good LD debaters I knew were almost always happier when they were negative in an important debate. And the few times I judged debates between really, really good Lincoln Douglas debaters, forgive me for bragging, but on one occasion I got to judge the winner of the Harvard Round Robin against the winner of NFL Nationals that year. That was a tough debate to judge, and the negative won. That happened just about any time I saw a real clash of the titans. Everything being equal, the negative tended to win. And I think that the affirmative has got the easier side of the subject matter. So that's something nice I can say about the topic, that it is nicely balanced in that sense, because you're going to have a really easy time coming up with examples, and pretty expansive examples, of where privacy is threatened and where the safeguards that exist are insufficient. So I want to do a little bit of talking about what to do on the negative. Now, on the one hand, I think that it probably is a good idea to do research into a lot of these different areas that I've already mentioned. Information privacy, medical record privacy, which is kind of a subset of information privacy, but kind of comes up to bodily integrity privacy as well. To do research in these different areas and to try to have good, specific, concrete things to say about how the specific practices that protect privacy are evolving, about how they're getting better and better, and there is an ethic of protection of privacy that is coming about. But that's only going to let you whittle away at some of the affirmatives' sort of staging claims, the claims that they're going to use, the examples they're going to use to try to set up whatever the impact is on their side of the debate. You need a little bit of offense. And so it's tricky finding people who will make the argument that doing a better job of defending our privacy is a bad thing. But there are a couple of books I think you ought to take a look at. One of them is by my old friend Amitai Etzioni. I sent you off looking for him. I think it was on the excellence topic, the competition cooperation topic, or it might have been idealism and pragmatism. But Amitai Etzioni, who is the father of communitarianism, the modern father of communitarianism, he published a book in 1999 called The Limits of Privacy. And he made some really actually quite good arguments about why the focus and the emphasis on privacy is something that's undesirable. So I think you ought to check that out. I think you also ought to go get a book by David Brin, also published I think it's a 1999 book. It might be a 2000 book called The Transparent Society. And he talks about technological trends and about how we're actually a little bit better off if we kind of throw up our hands on the whole privacy thing and start adapting to a world in which the norms and expectations change and we live with the fact that our information is out there. I think you could get some pretty nice arguments out of that. And then finally, there's a book by Dennis Bailey. In the Dennis Bailey book, the title of it is The Open Society Paradox, Why the 21st Century Calls for More Openness, Not Less. And that's a 2004 book. And what I would do if I were you is I would let the literature guide me, and I would dig through these and see what direction they take you. And from those arguments, I think that you can then do some secondary research and you can follow some footnotes, and you'll have an approach for what to do on the negative. So, quite a topic, and it's going to be quite a year, and I really think that if you do most of your thinking about, on the affirmative, what's an interpretation that lets me bring the topic down to a manageable size, and on the negative, how can I be ready for these various interpretations, and more to the point, maybe have a lot of practice debates over how can I object, how can I win the argument that I should win the debate because the affirmative has given me an undebatable interpretation. They've left me with no ground to argue. So you, the judge, should assess them a loss because this round is not a fair test of who did the better debating. And it's not a fair test, and this opportunity has been forfeited because of the choices my opponent made in setting up the debate. I think if you have a number of debates where you try to explain that argument and where you take the best opponent you can find and go through their best defenses and get really fluent and confident impacting that argument, then that's something that's going to pay off a lot by the end of the year. But check out those books and see what they can do as far as getting you some good offensive arguments to use on the negative, and I'll be back on another day with some ideas about the affirmative.